Got it all the way.
Before I start, I just want to say that this is my favorite venue for archaeology. I really look forward to this one every year. Every time I come here, I get a good feeling. It just feels nice and welcoming here. And I won't lie to you, once in a while, I think I'm really looking forward to the lunch. I can already smell it. So I'm really looking at the clock, getting us to the new clock hour so we can enjoy that great food. So good morning. Thanks to Greg County PUD. Thanks for everyone for having me here. I want to thank the other presenters as well. It's tough to get up here and speak sometimes.
Everybody get the mic turned up.
I know you came a long way, so I really appreciate that as well.
Oh, checked out. Okay, thank you.
Understanding just the antiquity of this landscape and the antiquity of the native people that exist on this landscape, it's really humbling for me to come here and speak. When I was a kid, I didn't grow up too far away. Just a little town, Natchez. I'm sure you all know where that's at. My dad and I would come down to Priest Rapids and we'd fish a lot. My dad loved hunting and fishing, so most of my younger days were out fishing, hunting, enjoying nature. And I remember floating down the river with my dad all the time, and I'd say, "Dad, why do they call this place Priest Rapids?" He'd just look at me and say, "Son, just watch your fishing pole, please. Don't ask questions, just watch it." So I'd ask my dad those questions all the time. Now, having looked around the landscape and talked to people around me and explored the world around me, I understand why that place has that name and the importance of this place that we're all at right now. So it is really humbling to be here to say some words on this landscape, and I appreciate it. So my dad and I, when we were fishing, we were interested in recreation. We valued recreation and we valued fish. And so that we looked at the landscape at that time. That's what we valued. And you're going to see through this presentation today, we're going to talk a lot about values. My professional career in archaeology started in the early mid-90s. I worked for private contractors, I worked for federal agencies. A number of years I worked at the Acoma Nation, and now I work for Central Washington University. So at the university I run PLOS, which is an educational program, and we hire students to do all of the work on campus in regards to cultural resource management. And we also develop these students onto external contracts. So they train up through campus and then they go out to work in the real world. So it's a real fun job. One of the seminal moments in my professional career was in 1996. And I was a student on a Central Washington University field school. And a man came to speak to that field school. Excuse me. And that was Mr. Johnson Menai. We all know Johnson. And he didn't talk very long, pretty short and to the point. But the things that he said at that time at that field school really spoke more to my heart than to my head, if you catch my drift. So that really affected me as a young student. It had a deep impact on me because I love science. I'm still very scientifically oriented today. I love data, I love technology, I love formulating hypotheses. I'm a world-class nerd and very proud of it. So going through all those scientific processes was really the value system that I was studying and growing to understand. So to have this elder speak to me and affect me a different way it took me a long time to get my mind around it. And after really years of reflection, I finally came to the conclusion that what Johnson was saying really wasn't out of the ordinary of anthropology. And I grew to understand his words through the anthropological ideas of participant observation and cultural relativism. And as I continued to develop professionally, I really saw that these different value systems actually articulate pretty well into the National Historic Preservation Act. And that, as you all know, is really the primary legal document that we deal with. As archaeologists, as scientists, man, we love criteria B. I can answer all sorts of great research questions and get into data about criterion, and that's where the archaeological value system focuses upon. But there's other criteria in the National Historic Preservation Act which archaeologists really have not the value systems or the tools to communicate it. And that's where other value systems come in, like traditional native values. So, obviously, working for a tribe affected me. You guys can all come to that conclusion really quick. In 2002, I went to work for the Yakama Nation, and I started on Columbus Day. So, my learning curve into the tribal perspective was pretty steep. I was a young guy, and there was a lot of learning that took place. The best advice I ever got when I went to work for the tribe, I was in way over my head. So I asked this close friend of mine, Canadian man who works there, I said, what am I supposed to do? And I got the best advice ever. Keep your mouth shut. And I did. For about a year, I don't think I really said anything. So, anyway, in 2008, I went back to work for Central Washington University. And I started there on April 1st. No lie. I haven't even got to the first slide. So, let's talk a little bit about CRM. As I said, I run QUAS, and so within QUAS, we'll have between 5 and 40 paid student workers working on campus. All those beautiful blue buildings on campus all have a cultural resource budget attached to them. So I built an extensive training program for these students to come through, undergraduate and graduate students. They do the work, they write the reports. We talk extensively about CRM issues. Once I went out the ones that I really liked, I put them on external contracts. And one of the contracts that we worked on very closely with the Yakama Nation was the removal of Condit Dam. So Condit Dam was removed October 26th of last year, so we're almost on the 1-year anniversary of that. So Condit Dam, we're first going to talk about a site near Condit Dam. So Condit Dam is about right here. What we were required to do for this contract is we had to mitigate the potential damages to Site 45, SA 444, and we also had to do extensive monitoring of the dewatered reservoir. Sounds pretty easy. So, first of all, let's start with the mitigation of 444. So I'm going to get right on it. All right. So this is a really interesting site. It was identified by Griffin and Churchill in 2001, and they put in one test unit, which is the green square right here. You can see there's a natural pinch point in the river. This is really just all basalt outcrops, and it's about 20 feet above the river right here. And so and the dam is about a mile upstream. So what they thought was going to happen when the dam breached, there was going to be an impoundment of debris and water here that would wash over and completely destroy the site. So we went in and excavated almost 1 cubic meter of intact sediment in 2 test units. So we focused our test units around the Griffin and Churchill. All right. So one thing I learned working for the Yakama is that it takes a team. If you're doing the entirety of CRM on your own, you're doing it wrong. And there's just too much work for one person to do it. And so it takes people that are highly technical skilled that can go into the field. It takes people that are highly technically skilled in analysis, GIS, and report writing, and many other factors as well. So the people that were out here in the field, Mike Pitts and Jared Valenta, Jamie McLean, and Colin Lamb, actually they had it pretty easy on this one. This was really a beautiful, scenic setting. This was the first 1x1 we put in. You can see immediately we hit the salt underground. So on the west end of the test units, they terminated very quickly. What we found was really supportive of what Griffin and Churchill found. Very high levels of lithic debitage and pretty high levels of very fragmentary fish remains. So what we found was about 465 fragmentary pieces of fish remains that were lightly burnt. And we only found a couple very identifiable pieces of faunal remains. And that was these, I was calling them claws at first, but later we figured out they were the spawning teeth off salmon. Additionally, we recovered over 600 lithic artifacts, mostly lithic debitage. I don't know if you guys are all as interested in lithic debitage as I am, but I'm pretty interested in it. So we developed a paradigmatic classification to classify the debitage, and it has 10 paradigms that have up to 8 dimensions in each paradigm. And so the numeric permutations of this are over 5 million categories in which you can define an artifact. For this site, we only created 62 categories, so it was this pretty specific lithic use of this area. And what we found is that, I gotta read off my notes here, most of the sites or most of the instances of lithic debitage were a 312-415-731 sighting map. What that means is unworn, chert, intermediate reduction, flake fragment of less than 1 centimeter. And so what really had going on here is that they weren't manufacturing stone tools, but people were modifying stone tools for the specific use of the area. There were 10 pieces of lithic debitage that had use wear on it. The use wear was all straight and polished, which is very indicative of slicing or cutting very soft materials, like fish. There was a high amount of obsidian at this site, and so we had it sourced. This was our sourcing that came back. Even early in my career, I am just really awestruck by the extensive trade routes that are in place. And that's the one thing that obsidian really highlights, is how far things are traded. When Griffin and Churchill went out there, they identified a lot of the obsidian was from an unknown source. And we re-identified that type of obsidian, and it's been recently sourced to Indian rock, which is right there. There's our site. Okay, this was a really unique. Let me go back on. Going back on, there were 3 projectile points identified, and they're all very late phase, associated with bow and arrow. But thank you. But this artifact really struck our interest. This is a pentagonal knife. We really had to tear through literature to see what people were saying about the pentagonal knife or a mutilated knife. And what we found was actually really interesting. So Strong in 1930 was the first professional archaeologist to really identify this form of artifact. And he's the one that termed pentagonal knife. It was Garth in '52 that labeled the more colloquial term mutilated knife, and that was really from local collectors. That was their terminology for this item. But the most interesting one was Nelson, 1969, from right up Sunset Creek. He had a fairly extensive write-up of this tool, which was left unreferenced in his report. But he identifies this specific tool as being largely associated with Cayuse 3, which is all very late phase bow and arrow type of technologies. But he also associated it with women. It's a happy faith. And he says specifically in his report that this tool is specifically a woman's tool. And I thought that was really fascinating because so oftentimes in archaeology we're so focused on projectile point chronologies that these other tools and items kind of get pushed by the way. But I know that Nelson worked in this area. I know native people of this area are very welcoming. And so I'm making the assumption that he has had some sort of conversation with native people of this area about why this tool specifically is a woman's item. So if anyone knows anything about that, I'd love to hear about it. Another thing associated with this tool, we had Dr. McCutcheon look at it with his super sciencey microscope. And again, the same type of wear patterns that we were seeing on the lithic debitage and some bifaces. Very sharp tool, and looked like it was being used to cut soft items. Again, I'm thinking fish. All right. So there's Condit Dam. So when they breached the dam, our site 45 SA 444 was not washed over. So they breached the dam actually very low, right in this area. Has anyone looked at this online? You should. Yeah, I had videos plugged in here, but they didn't work very well. So after this presentation, go Google this, and it's fascinating to see the reservoir dewater and the dam actually breached. They didn't drop a 1,000-pound bomb on it and blow it up, which I would like to see. But they really just bored in here at the bottom, and it took about 7 hours for the entire reservoir to drain out. Okay, very scenic. You can keep in mind this buoy line right here. Oh, here's another view of 444. You can see our test unit right here. Our other unit was. One thing that I failed to mention that Griffin and Churchill also did interviews for TCPs with the African Nation elders, and this area was identified as a prime fishing location. So you can see it's heavily associated with fish. And so I think the archaeology is showing us that fish were obviously procured here and probably processed and consumed here. But we're really only a couple miles down to the Columbia River too. And we all know there's some very major villages down there. And I think it'd be pretty easy to procure fish here and then quick boat trip down the river. Okay, so this is a view from the top of the dam looking upstream. Now, when you say, oh, we're going to monitor behind the dam after they dewater it, you're like, no problem. I don't see really many issues with that. Whoa. More issues than you can imagine. And actually, one of the primary issues we dealt with was safety. It was an incredibly unsafe environment. And this comes back to that team concept. As a project manager, I'm putting crews out in the field, and these are young guys and gals, and they're excited. They're ready to get after this. And only 2 safety violations later, I finally got them to understand that there's areas you cannot go because your life is on the line. And so that's one thing we really struggled with through this whole project was keeping the crews focused and safe at the same time trying to go out and protect these resources. So the scale doesn't really do it justice, but you can see the red buoys. One thing that we really dealt with through this whole project was the historic infrastructure. This crib structure was built concurrently with the dam to hold the water back as they built the dam. And so a lot of these things were identified in the Historic Properties Management Plan, and they were identified to be removed. We could never get text down there to really do an up-close recordation of this feature because it was just literally too unsafe. Okay, here's another view of the dam, or the dewatered area, but you can really see just the soupiness, for lack of a better term. Okay, this one demonstrates a little bit better just the dangerous sediments. most of these areas were flagged off because literally if you walked here, you were looking at a 60-foot silt drop to the river. So, and if you would stand and watch this, literally through the weeks, huge, metric tons of sediment would wash out and downstream. So, here's a close-up of the copper dam. Here's some more historic infrastructure, the old bridge, or the old bridge components. Okay, so working with the contractor, they went out with their soil engineers and inventoried all of the sediment loads behind the dam. So the red areas, you can see where most of these streams are coming in. The red areas are obviously heavily silted because they're pulling in sediment from other drainages. And so they actually went out with tracked vehicles and large water hoses to flush this stuff out. So this created the archaeological issue for us. What is a native surface and what is a historic sediment? And how do we get people out there to record resources and not risk people's lives? So it was a complex balancing set of values to get people out there. What we came up with is that when we could, we would send people out with the track hose to monitor the sediment loss. And whenever a native surface was exposed, we did very fine-grained surveys over that area. Native surfaces, you could often find them because they were filled with tree stumps. So when you got to the tree stumps, you knew you were there. The one thing that we struggled with was the historic sediment. What about all the artifacts that are in there? So we wrote this, what we thought was this incredibly clever sentence that artifacts in this area will only be collected if they have scientific or educational or cultural merit. Okay. That's some real management language there. Because mostly what are we finding in there? Very well preserved beer cans. So it becomes a curation issue for Pacificor because there's these wonderful beer cans in this historic sediment, but do we really want to spend resources curating all of these beer cans? Maybe not. There's possibly other things that we should go after. Value systems again. We're coming back to that. Okay, this is a good picture for scale. You can see some people right here. That's about how close our monitors can get at times. And there's obviously the heavy equipment. So the sheer scale and volume of sediment leaving was inspiring. Okay, through our evaluations, we did identify a number of properties. We identified this was a historic can scatter from the building of the dam that was on a native surface. We recorded that one. This was actually another Native American site that had a very similar artifact assemblage to 45 SA 444. Same lithic assemblage, late phase projectile points, lots of obsidian. The two sites next to it were historic wooden crib structures that were little micro dams on these drainages. So, as this progressed, I got a call from the program manager working down there, and he said, "Shane, we have a problem." So, what's the problem? He's like, "Well, all of our workers running the backhoe equipment, they're collecting all of these beer cans." Like, well, how many have they collected? Well, about 100. He said they're being very good at it. I don't know if you've ever worked with those heavy equipment operators, but they can literally just pick up a can right out of these sediments. They're incredibly skilled individuals. So the archaeologist takes them. I said, "What are they taking GPS points?" Like, "Oh yeah, they're taking GPS points. They're marking it down, and they're all in the office." So I came down and looked at it, and well, I was a little taken aback. He said, "How does this fit into our collection plan?" I was like, "Well, they have to have educational, cultural, or educational, cultural, or scientific merit. It's like, well, what does this fall under? Well, recreation values. I think these have a cultural value. And so the program manager said, why do you think they have a cultural value? I said, well, people are picking them up. So there we go. And it was just such an eye-opening moment for me, because as an archaeologist, I was so focused on the Native American archaeology. I was so focused on the native surfaces that I completely wrote off this whole other archaeological deposit, the historic deposit behind the reservoir. I purposely crafted this language where it wasn't really important to the archaeologists, but it was really important to some other people, and I never identified that until this moment. And so when I saw this, it made me think about fishing with my dad down in Priest Rapids. Like, oh my God, I completely forgot about that value system. So, I know some of my students are out here, and if you take anything away from this conversation, this is what you need to take away. CRM is complex. You are going to interact with different value systems. Be prepared to appreciate these value systems that you meet. These value systems might be scientific. These value systems might be traditional. And these value systems might come right out of a historic deposit behind a dam. You don't know where they're going to come from. So, can I answer any questions? Oh, I forgot about this one. I'm sorry, let me get one more. Another deposit I completely forgot about was the dam itself. So the dam is completely gone right now. They used heavy equipment to really just break it apart. And so the men working on the dam found these tools actually within the concrete of the dam. So I didn't even think about finding stuff in concrete, but I'm very happy that these individuals found and salvaged these items. I think these are going to be outstanding museum pieces. So, okay. All right. Any questions? Yes.
You mentioned that those sites were identifiable by the tree stumps. How did the tree stumps figure that your assumption?
The tree stumps identified the native surfaces, and so we figured that the native surfaces would have the potential for a native deposit, i.e., intact archaeology, instead of all the glacial till that had built up on the native surfaces. So, did I answer that? Okay. Yes?
How did you mitigate the water?
So how is the turbidity of the water flowing into the Columbia? That one was totally outside of my realm. They had pretty serious soil scientists and hydro engineers, and I think what they did, it was specifically in how they breached the dam. They breached it very low, so the water wouldn't rush out in a tidal. And so, like I said, it took about 7 hours for the water to really stabilize. And I think that was how they were addressing the turbidity. They're still dealing with the soil sediments. If you go down to where the white salmon connects into the Columbia River, you can see these massive soil or sandbars out there now. So I think it will take years for it to flush on down. So, any more questions? Yes.
I know you talk about archaeology, but I was just curious, before the project began, did they do sampling of the sediments to determine what was in those and then what might be washed out? And if so, was there a report to that effect?
There was over 10 years of technical reports done in regards to geology, geography, soil analysis, soil sediments behind the dam. We were really focused on just the archaeology. There was the Griffin and Churchill work in 2001 was the original archaeological work for the area. So there was 10, 15 years of compliance work in almost in every environmental discipline you can imagine. And I think most of those reports, if not all of them, except the sensitive archaeological stuff, are available online through Pacific Corp, because it was a Pacific Corp project.
Just in the news this morning, I heard coming in about the Colvilles dealing with sediments upriver and up the big river from Canada. And what's in those is being a real issue.
Yeah, different set issue in those.
They were clean.
Any more? Yes.
What was the most interesting bottle in beer tasting?
There was a 1930s Lucky Lager that was great. With the church key on top. It was impressive. So, there was a tomato soup can that had this character on it that was pretty good as well. So.
All right, let's give him a hand. Thank you, Shane. And also, the gift here for Shane, and appreciate him coming up and presenting. All right, cool. Thank you, Shane. All right, we're going to move into our next one. Looks like Shane put us right back on schedule, so that's good. And this next one is going to be Gideon Kaufman, and we appreciate him coming over from the west side now. He used to be here in the Yakima Valley, but in Ellensburg, and now he's on the west side. So let's give Gideon Kaufman a hand for being a presenter today. Gideon,
I'll try to do the stand-up comedy side karaoke microphone. See how that goes. Thank you very much, Rex. Much like what Shane was saying, I'm very blessed to be here and to see good friends again. My jaw was actually kind of hurting outside because I was smiling so much, and just seeing people out there working and tanning eyes and feeling happy, and just some old familiar faces and younger familiar faces that were on. Aaron Koontz, the archaeologist here at Grant County PUD, called me a few weeks ago to present. And he wanted me to talk about the Ella dam removal. And I had to say, I'm actually kind of off by one. I'm Jamestown, Scotland. That's lower Ella, but I came in contact with somebody. And he said, well, you're the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer there, right? And, well, no, not officially the TIPO yet. But I kind of am the TIPO. I'm the Culture Resources Manager. I'm also the NAGPRA person, the collection manager, the bookkeeper, and all that. So I'm the Culture Resources Department. In addition to doing culture resources, I'm also the enrollment department for the tribe. So when we talk about culture resources, you can't negate people. So even though enrollment and CRM are completely different, it does offer a very unique perspective. We're going to see a little bit of intersection with that here. So I'm going to give a brief overview slide. It's usually against my mantra to do that. Long. There we go. Good. There we go. Okay. So a little brief about the Jamestown Scotland tribe history. What was in place when I arrived? My culture resource management vision, the application of that vision so far, forthcoming efforts, and of course a little question and answer session for folks. There we go. Okay. So the Jamestown Sklallam were the Sklallam people, were known as the mixed Sklallam. And how they got their name was there was a potlatch going on. They were trying to erect a longhouse. And when they were doing that, there was a large log they had to try to erect. None of the other tribes were able to do it. So a group of guys got together and rolled the log into the water and got it to float, and then got that log up onto their shoulders, and then they were able to then bring that log up and then erect it. And everybody goes, these people are Sklallam. It means the strong people. So that's how they got their name, and not necessarily physical strength, but maybe mental strength. There was probably contact in the 1500s during the age of exploration But the first written record came from George Vancouver in 1792. And he noted that there was already a smallpox epidemic that was going on amongst the Squamish people. And that's important. That's why you have tribal members that look like yours truly. So a little more of a dilute bloodline and also a lower population. I'll talk a little bit about our population here in a few slides. Where we are, it's that red star right there. Very remote. It's over by Squim, Washington. It's about, if you're driving, 2.5 hours from Olympia, along 101. Olympia is right about there. Beautiful drive along the Hood Canal. We're about 3 hours from Tulalip, and about 2 hours from Seattle. It's in the rain shadow of the Olympic Mountains. We get about 16 inches a year, but still very heavily forested. So going from a shrub steppe to a forested area was a real game changer for me, and seeing the difference in archaeology. And it changed the fieldwork and being a little wetter when I get back in the office. 1855, during the treaty times, we're under the Point No Point Treaty. But when they were drafting the treaties, they wanted the Squam to join the Skokomish tribe. But we wanted to remain independent, so we did not get recognized during the treaty times. Instead, in 1877, James Balch purchased a tract of land just north of Squim, hence Jamestown, Squam tribe, for $500. What's unique about this is that you see these tracks, how they're really long and linear. And that's in order to have canoes. So you could then get your canoe landing, and then you could have enough kind of like a driveway for your canoe, so to speak. Those tracks are still like that today. So sometimes your closest neighbor might actually live behind you. So very, very unique. So during the Indian Reorganization Act in the 1930s, tribes were becoming federally recognized. Port Gamble Squam tribe, they were in an area also known as Little Boston, now it's called Port Gamble. They were recognized in 1939. Lower Elwha Klamath were shortly thereafter, about 30 years later. But Jamestown wanted to remain independent and not want to be part of the Reorganization Act. So they went through what was called the BIA acknowledgement process, which is a 7-step process to federal recognition. An interesting fact is that since 1960, only about 8% of tribes have gained federal recognition. So it is a rigorous process. We were federally recognized in 1981. Their mission statement here, I guess I'll read it here. The Jamestown Squam tribe seeks to be self-sufficient and provide quality governmental programs and services to address unique social, cultural, natural resource, and economic needs of our people. The programs and services must be managed while preserving, restoring, and sustaining our Indian heritage and ensuring community continuity. Here we have the tribal emblem here, the eagle and salmon. And kind of going along the lines with our mission statement, for our speakers today, I brought the report to tribal citizens for folks, so Shane, Kelly, Mark, and others who go ahead and grab that, as well as some notepads here too, so we guys get a chance to go ahead and snag that. So there's a few extras as well in the back, and also some bookmarks. So we don't have much of a land base outside of that small area of Jamestown. So only about 13 acres of reservation land. So we're essentially land barons to some extent, because we're constantly trying to purchase land, which will be a fee land, meaning that we pay tax on, and then we try to put that into tribal trust land. Right now, as well as properties of interest. So whether that's for restoration needs or economic development, or a variety of other things that are important to the tribe. This is what's called a land consolidation area, and it's a mismatch of various lands, whether that's reservation, fee, and trust land. It essentially goes from Quilcene, there we have Port Townsend right there, and then Port Angeles is right there. Dutchess Spit right there. There's Discovery Bay and Squid Bay right there. And our tribal office is right here. It's located in Blinn, Washington. And the reason why we decided to have it in Blinn, Washington, or why people who are established the tribe decided to have it in Blinn, was because that is a good medium between Jefferson County and Clallam County, where we have a split of tribal members between Jefferson and Clallam County. Our tribal population is at 594 people, and we use the term tribal citizens. This was passed by vote amongst all of our enrolled tribal members, tribal people. I had to change that last night. Once again, since I'm an enrollment officer, I deal with death benefits of tribal people, so I get a notification when somebody passes away. So we went from 595 to 594 in just a period of time. And our population is really on decline. Over 50% of our tribe actually lives outside of that land consolidation area. All right, so how do we develop this land? So one part of that is we have a Jamestown Savannah Vision Site, and we have various projects that are going on. So this is the welcome site right here, and I apologize for the blurry screenshots. Okay, so here's various projects we have going on. Whether it's government stuff, cultural preservation, we have different resorts, the Seven Cedars Casino, and then there's natural resource issues probably down here and whatnot. If we were to scroll down. I'm going to talk a little bit about Tumano's Rock. So using that as an example, if you were to click on that, you would then go to this page, which would then have the project description, who's in charge. Leo Gaten is our policy governmental advisor. And also, where are we as far as progress? Whether that's active, is it a concept? So once it gets to 30%, then it becomes part of that conceptual phase. And then that kicks in cultural resources, which I'll talk about a little bit. One thing that was set in place was the Tribal Environmental Policy Act, or TEPA. So this essentially works a lot like the SEPA process does with the state, where if there's a tribal project, then they submit an application, and then we review it and see whether or not there's any issues, whether it's cultural resources or natural resources issues. My supervisor is the planning director, Leanne Jenkins. So it's kind of unique being a cultural resources person and working under planning. But what's nice about that, it really expedites the process because all of that stuff ends up going under my nose at some point. Here's a flow chart kind of showing that the TEPA process, somebody applies, we review whether or not it's a tribal project, and then whether there's any issues. If there are any issues, there is an appeal process. In order to appeal, you have to do that through tribal council. So as I'm working on reports and whatnot, it goes on a SharePoint site. So here's, Education Department has a tab on that site. Here's the planning tab, the shared documents. Once again, if we were to click on that, for example, here's some of my CRM reports. Then I can receive internal comments. It works out great because I could, once I draft a report, I could send out a link to the affected parties, and then they get a chance to comment on it. It just really streamlines the process. At the same time, I have to submit reports to some people who might not even have email or anything else like that. So I still do the old school mailings of a few, which is great. We've had a great natural resource department since the mid-80s, working with shellfish, gooey duck, oysters, and a variety of others. One thing I learned when I first got there was a lot of these shellfish beds are zoned for commercial use, but even though we don't do any commercial gathering in that area per se, we'll still zone it as that because it'll go under FDA guidelines, which means it has to have a lower amount of biotoxins, which will actually help us approve for grants and whatnot, and actually have more stringent rules and guidelines for that. Habitat management, usual restoration projects, and all that kind of good stuff that natural resource people do. Probably one of our more well-known projects is the Jimmy Come Lately and also the Dean Creek project. And here we have a 2001 where you see very little meandering of Dean Creek up there in the north, and Jimmy Come Lately there on the kind of southern spot. Here we have just 5 years later how they've created different check dams and whatnot, better meandering, Plus, there was a log dump right here, and that has since been removed. So just really enhancing the riparian areas as well as the bay, because they eventually drain into the bay. All right, so for cultural resource management, one thing that was in place was the House of Seven Generations, which is our online museum. This was done through the Institute of Museum Library Studies grant. And what that is that's a webpage. You go to jamestowntribe.org and follow the links. I gave just a few examples here. We have the Washington Harbor artifacts that folks can look at, as well as people's personal collections. People have brought us family photos, as well as maybe artwork they've done. It could either be put online if they want to, if they're not comfortable with that, but then it could go on our dark drive where it's not available to the public. Just a little FYI, this is my grandpa, Walt Karnowski. And of course, the canoe paddle, we have a cultural coordinator that works for us, Vicki Carroll, and right now one of our special exhibits is for canoe paddles. This is the Lacanum canoe, the oldest squam canoe. I think it was built in like 96, something like that. And of course, economic development, which is something that tribes are really doing now, of course. The Yakama Nation has Legends Casino. We have Seven Cedars Casino. It's a smaller casino because the population of Sequim is around 10,000 people, so it's about 400 slot machines. We have Jamestown Excavating. They do everything from excavation, demolition, and other forms of construction, as well as help us with riparian efforts and restoration. The Cedars of Dungeness, probably one of the ones I like to patronize the most, other than the Longhouse when I go there for lunch. I'll talk about Cedars in a little bit. In December of 2011, Kathy Duncan, my predecessor, retired after working for the tribe for 13 years. Here's a photo of her and very dear to here, a friend of mine, Josh. They're documenting a large needle that we use for weaving in order to put that in the House of Seven Generations. So I ended up getting hired on, and not too many people really knew me. They know me obviously because I'm a tribal member, but I worked for Yakama Nation, and I was like an archaeologist. I got a master's degree, and the tribe could help fund for my education. But Kathy was very involved with primarily NEGPA issues. I would have to guess that she probably repatriated just slightly under 1,000 people when it's all said and done. Some of those individuals might be big enough to fill into a film container, but still, she was very on to NEGPA issues. But all of the cultural resource reporting was contracted out, and the review was primarily government to government, not so much at a technical level. So I really wanted to change that and be more hands-on with cultural resources. So I wrote this about 11 o'clock 2 nights ago. I didn't really figure out how I got from point A to point B. I needed to get that good gap here for this crowd. So a good vision statement would be, we have an obligation to be proactive in the management of cultural resources. Federal, state, and local governments are bound by written laws. However, as tribal people, we are bound by unwritten laws that have been in place since time immemorial. Preserve the past and educate the future. And I think the key words there are obligation. As tribes, we do have an obligation to preserve and protect cultural resources, as well as being proactive, not reactive, but proactive. So I developed different zones of management. I did this as a way to convince upper management that cultural resources are important. Because once again, there's economic development, there's restoration efforts, there's other efforts that tribes are doing that could affect cultural resources. So I don't want it to be too much of a shock to upper management when I say, yeah, you can't just build and no monitoring doesn't really cut the mustard, and no, the integrated discovery plan doesn't work because nobody ever calls me, ever. Yeah, when you find something, call me. So I developed 3 zones of management. Line orange, and yellow. And I chose those colors after working for Yakima Nation, and those are the colors for describing essential and non-essential programs. But I just really like using lime instead of green and orange, because orange is a fruit, but also a color. Sometimes lime is your basic need, and then orange, a little bit more than that, maybe with traditional cultural properties and oral history. And yellow, you get more into public outreach as well as policy making. Now, just because there's changes in priorities all the time. So something might not change priorities because you checked off a low priority, now that becomes medium, but because the opportunity changes, whether that's money, you get funding, or maybe just the stars just happen to be aligned just right. And I'll talk a little bit about that too. So for the limestone, so for legal justification of limestone, National Historic Preservation Act, and also ARPA, the two there. I like to see adequate CRM reporting within our land consolidation area. So at least, did someone actually go out in the field and survey, and did subsurface tests, and they actually write a report? They do that, great job. Tribal projects need to be done by tribal staff, whether it's yours truly, or perhaps contracted out, but ideally it'd be myself. And then also demonstrate a need for equipment by passing a tribal resolution 1207. Our chairman has been very supportive of myself. I think passed now 6 tribal resolutions, some for cultural resources, and a lot for enrollment. And he's signed every letter that I've put on him. The only comment he ever makes is try to keep it to 1 page. So more about limestone stuff. Okay, so our agencies who tend to do the nothing. Failed to the minimum. I attend monthly timber, fish, and wildlife meetings. This helps keep my hand on the pulse with the Department of Natural Resources in regards to logging permits. Other tribes that attend that are Yakima Nation, David Powell attends that, Justine James from Quileute, and Dave Burlingame from Cowlitz. And the agencies, and also Puyallup, Jeffrey Thomas from Puyallup. The agencies are DNR and also Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. Neighborhood consultation, of course, collections management. Our collections area, it's about 100 square feet. So when, I think it was Angela was talking about having 1,000 square feet, ours is about the size of that corner, and it looks like something you would see off of hoarders buried alive. So that's one thing that I would like to change is getting our collections a little bit more up to speed. Records management. We have a huge amount of records, whether that's digital and also hard copy records, so managing all of that is important. Okay, so orange stone. So then we get more into the traditional cultural property documentation, traditional or oral history, and AirFUD issues. I'd like to see better funding through contracts and grants, and for doing limestone work, and then, as I mentioned, traditional cultural properties and oral histories. Another part, developing a cultural resource management plan and a historic properties management plan for the tribe. As well as the intertribal research design. I work closely with the Lower Ewok Clown and the Port Vanderbilt Clown tribes, and being able to get together and meet and agree on something. I know it's difficult for archaeologists, let alone tribal archaeologists, to agree, but keep in mind we are all Sklown, the three of us, but at the same breath we are 3 different federally recognized tribes. So the more hands that hold on to the spear, the stronger we are. We definitely know that, and there are certain times where I think folks are biting their tongue at the table, but we all get along just wonderfully. Bill White over at Lower Ewok is my point of contact over there, and Joshua Winkowski over at Port Vanderbilt Clown over there. Everybody has their own expertise. Bill's a lot of upland forest management stuff. Josh, his background is coastal archaeology. He did a lot of work in Alaska with fish traps. And of course myself, I'm a jack of all trades and I'm a master of none. We also have an obligation as well to educate tribal citizens about the importance of cultural resources and the the nuts and bolts of archaeology as well. And then the yellow zone here. So getting into Moss Bennett, so artifacts that might not be of historical importance, but of scientific importance. So I guess not artifacts, but geofact, fossils and whatnot. Public education, going out and meeting with universities and other public entities, and also policy changes. One thing I would like to see is a policy change regarding pre-contact artifacts. If it predates 1492, chances are it's probably actually native. So regarding ARPA issues and in other cases where, who owns the artifact, so to speak, I think a 3,000-year-old artifact probably should be the tribes, not the private landowner who just happened to move there in 1985, and now they've got artifacts. Some more policy stuff. Maybe establish a museum at some point, but their collections is number one. And then eventually a tribal historic preservation office. So next is going into how some of these have gone. So one thing, I had absolutely no equipment at all. So I had to go and figure out a way to fund that. And I did that through the National Park Service. So I applied for a grant, which I ended up getting, which was the Historic Preservation Fund's grant to Indian tribes, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiian organizations. And this was primarily going to be used for documenting Tamaulipas rock. It also has a high education component, and it's going to be the strict criteria D archaeology. The reason why it's going to be Crit D is because that's what the stipulations for the grants are. I'm going to work on A and B probably next year at FY13. And then we'll get some recording equipment so then I can record oral histories and stories. I'm kind of cheating as well because I've already kind of started talking to informants. And the total amount, as you see there, $23,628.71 was what I applied for. And then the tribe has to match $7,511.67. So a little over 30 grand for the project total. So before and after photos, as far as what I had. So going from an empty closet to having screens, shovels, soil probe, GPS unit, pin flags, all the usual archaeological supplies and equipment. So, example project, one of my first projects I got to do was they needed me to survey the golf course in order to change it from fee land into trust land. And I'm an absolutely terrible golfer, but I enjoy going out there, so I was more than happy to go and do a survey. One of the conclusions I made was that we need to, in 2020, put Old Crabby, or at least try to put Old Crabby on the National Register. That's our signature mold there, because it'll be 50 years old. So that was Crit C, since it's landscape architecture. That's what I recommend. Another good concept phase. This is Crossroads Village, Port Townsend, Washington. This is probably right up here somewhere. But in order to go there, you have to either take Highway 20 right here, or you can take Highway 19 and then that intersects with 20. So no matter what, you have to drive by here. It's a horrible place for a used car lot, but it's a really good place for a gas station / deli. So that's what we're going to build here. Nothing to write home about, no artifacts were found. It was really tough digging because it was glacial till. I dug one hole and there are a few backhoe trenches there already. So I use that as my subsurface testing. It's basically like digging in concrete. My first interagency contract was through the Forest Service Agency. I sent a nasty letter to USDA because all they did was a Wizard database search to see if there are any archaeological sites in an area. And they were, of course, saying, well, we can't do this, we can't afford to have someone go out and do a survey. So I asked my supervisor, we went out and did a pro bono thing, saved a little bit of money. So that kind of was, so I taught him GIS and how to make points and just copy that and digitize it. And I was thinking, okay, this is going to be an all-day project for this kid. I can just like hang out. He was done in 15 minutes. And it's like, take a break, I'll think of something for you to do. But it was a great experience in being able to pass on that knowledge and send a report to Kathy and writing a letter that says, this will be the last cultural resource report you'll ever have to review. It's kind of a joke. But yeah, great kid. He's actually in Florida too, so you know, a little bit of an environmental change for him too. Okay, so this is a good project too. Beckett Point, this is out on Discovery Bay. In 2007, human remains were found on the northern portion of the point, right about there. It says at a time that it's under private ownership. And these are fishing, they used to be fishing community, but now it's more for people for their third or fourth home, stuff like that. There have been about 30 reports done in that area, and they've all been done by private firms. The amount of tribal influence or tribal consultation was just kind of done at the bare minimum. Here's the report, we didn't find anything. No matter how hard we argued on it always kind of go forward. So I got a phone call from somebody who needed a permit done, and I was more than willing to go out and do the survey and subsurface test. So making real nice maps here. We have our transect lines, as well as what the area looked like. I did have two positive shovel probes with shell emitted, but it was not intact. Where I'd find shell emitted, then I'd find like styrofoam or a piece of plastic right below it. So that's one aspect with archaeology on the west side, is that fill material can contain artifacts and also human remains. So that was another game changer for me as well, because I know when I was doing archaeology over here, if it was fill material, it's like, oh, they just got it out of the mine. And this was because they had gotten material from the north side of that, and they deposited on the south side. But at the same time, other than doing the nuts and bolts archaeology, I have to consider the larger zone of influence of this landscape. So this point is just one point in Discovery Bay. So this is probably a short-term occupation area where people would probably camp right before they go to a larger village on the southern parts of Discovery Bay. I also considered this impact, visual impact to Protection Island. You can see Protection Island right there between those two houses. But once again, having that mindset that there's a larger landscape, and including that in the report, that way it's documented in the technical report in case it comes up later, and it probably will. I got a phone call from a tribal elder, once again being an enrollment officer, and she wanted to be buried next to her family. And she goes, is there any room, Jamestown Scum Cemetery, for me to be buried here? And I don't know. And it was like maybe the third phone call I'd gotten for burial issues. So I went out there with the GPS unit and I mapped all the marked graves as well as some of these features as well. It's 176 marked burials out there. From here, we're going to have to develop a burial policy as far as who can be buried out there and whatnot, because we do have some non-Jamestown out there, to include spouses, domestic partners, and other folks in that. So, tribal council tasked me with that like, I don't know, a couple days ago. There's also a canoe out there. This is from Graveyard Squid from the 1920s. Incomplete canoe, but interesting. All right, Tomonwas Rock. It's a traditional cultural property right there. Here's the backside of the rock. It's a basalt outcrop. And it's younger in geologic terms. I think it's 600 million years old. But we are currently in the process of purchasing this land and putting it into trust. And there's a smell, no, I don't have that, that would be something different. But as well as improving a road, including a parking area so tribal people could go there and be able to access the rock. This is a part of the roads grant, and there's the parking area. I've dug about 10 shovel probes, well, exactly 10 shovel probes in that area, and it's about 20 centimeters in depth before you hit bedrock. So no artifacts, which is good, of course. So here's the rock, right there. You see it right there as well. So we're this is property that we own. We'll basically be this chunk right there. So the next steps is survey this and also this and a shovel test. They're going to be doing some non-commercial thinning of that area and taking care of the invasive weeds. So it's important for myself to go out there and survey and test before doing that. So maybe next year I can talk about the conclusions of that project. There's direct impacts. We have graffiti as well as garbage. I pick up garbage each time I'm out there. And each time I've been out there, there have been other folks. So in order to deal with that, it's communicating with, this is Clown County Sheriff, so Tomanos Rocks in Jefferson County. So this is getting a good communication with the Sheriff Office. That way they have people doing patrols in that area. Since our tribe is so small, we don't have tribal police. So as a way to offset putting land into trust, we fund the sheriff to then go and patrol areas of interest. And we do the same thing as well with the fire department as well. So here's the Glen Fire Station, which we built, and as well as put a totem pole out front. And what I like about this totem pole is that on the top of it, it's robin, and the reason why is because Raven, who's on the bottom, controlled the fire. And all the animals were trying to play tricks on it. Eventually Robin got a hold of it. And that's why Robin has the red breast, because he controls the fire. So, interesting story. And then the lesson direct impacts. You can almost hear the school bus going right there when I was taking this photograph, but here we have a trailer park. Once again, when you're close to a trailer park, you might have certain trailer park issues affect your land. And then also Indian Island Naval Base is out there. There's also a cell phone tower, which is off photograph, like right there somewhere. But once again, going and documenting the larger, big picture issues when you're out in the field, not just the nuts and bolts archaeology. And then when I go out there with tribal elders and getting their stories, it'll be helpful in that. Collections management. So one of the first things we did was develop a disaster plan. And this was done by West Pass. And it was a free seminar. If you have a collection, I would highly recommend going. It's at University of Washington, and it's worth its weight in gold. We had to create an inventory as well as establish priorities and also who's on the team. And we created a pocket booklet. If you were to print this out on 8 by 14, you could fold it up and you could fit it inside your wallet. And that way, if a pipe breaks, then you could open it up and you can figure out where the water valves are or who to contact. Who in Swim has a walk-in freezer that we can use in case we need to quickly preserve something before it disintegrates. Educating tribal youth. So as you can see, they get to sit through my fun PowerPoint presentations too. You get to see the enthusiasm. But, I taught them a little bit about lithics here, sand, safety glasses, and gloves. And the gist of it is that a lithic, or a piece of soil, or they also made soil layers and also learned about mapping. But whether it's just a piece of chip stone or soil layer, it has a story behind it. So creating a story of these lithics and chunks of soil, they weren't going to get graded on it, we weren't trying to, turn them into soil scientists or archaeologists, but at least get them cognitive of that. That it's not just chips of stone, it's not just dirt. It actually has value to it. More public outreach here. We have the Olympic Peninsula Intertribal Cultural Advisory Committee, or OPACAC. This is a mix of 9 tribes here. And what we did was we deal with cultural resource issues on the Olympic Peninsula. And it's also a National Park Service. And of course, you can see the list of tribes up there. And one thing that the group did, if I go over here, it's not going to. Feedback is that there's a paper bag under that seat. Sorry about that. So one thing we did was released a book, Hands of the Weaver. And this outlines basketry on the Olympic Peninsula. So what I wanted to do was give this to the Wanapum so that they have something to put in their heritage center. If you know that. Yeah. I had actually nothing to do with the book. I just take credit for it and go around. Here's another one too. This is totem poles. Even totem poles are technically a cultural, a traditional cultural aspect of the Skylum people. We would carve on little rocks like this, but of course when people drive by, you can't have it on little rocks. We have about 30 totem poles around our campus, and our goal is to have 60. We want to actually double that. So there's that too. Yeah. All right. We received a conditional gift from a gentleman who just really likes natives. I can't tell you how much it is, but it's under $1 million from my understanding of it. One of the big aspects of it is that it has to be used for education and creating scholarships for tribal people. The guy, he wrote a check for $2,000 just randomly to a language preservation person. So just amazing to get that kind of funding. More outreach stuff, dealing with Jefferson County, and talking to people not only as a controversy, but just to casually introduce oneself, which is what I did for the Seattle Corps of Engineers when I was at the collection disaster planning meeting. More outreach, telling people don't understand what archaeology is. So that archaeologists take for granted. They picture the guys out there with the paintbrushes and Indiana Jones hats and whatnot. But it's good to get upper management out there to understand that it is actually arduous work that I'm doing. And that way they understand when I say systematic survey and subsurface testing, what that means exactly. So I am out here with an NSE, or Chief Operations Officer. We're working with the School Museum Arts Center. I'm on the board of trustees of that. We just released a exhibit with the Johnson family. It's going to be a constant circulating exhibit. So in December, it's going to be youth, and then in June, it's going to be another family. I think it's going to be the Adams family that is this next one on board. Then after that, who knows? Maybe the Karnonsky, just my family. Consultation letters. So, like I mentioned, our chairman seemed to have signed everything I've put under his nose. This is one that involves American Digger, and there are 2 letters written. One was to Spike TV, and one was to National Geographic. And the TV show would basically, they would go, they would dig up artifacts, and then they would sell them, and then they would split the profits with the landowner. And between, Jamestown and Department of Archaeology, and I think another tribe had written a letter. I think there's no way they're ever going to come to Washington State. But we would still maybe like to see that show pulled. At least National Geographic got back to us and said, yeah, we know it's a concerned Society of American Archaeology. Wrote us a letter in addition to this, and we're going to at least act like we care about it. Another interesting consultation that I wrote, this was regarding the Marple site. This is just south of Vancouver, BC. So well outside of our UNA in a different country, but it involves a First Nation, the Musqueam. And this was a site that they're going to be building a 5-story condo on. And it's a shell linen and also human remains as well. And what I said in this letter is pointed out that this is an important area, and I cited the various villages that we knew about, and how we have laws here in America that prevent this kind of stuff from happening, and citing that damage assessment I did last time I presented. There we go. Okay, so eventually that kind of won the fight, and that they weren't allowed, they weren't reissued their permits, so construction was halted in that regard. So far, between the consultation letters and whatnot, got about 3 grant contracts, about $23,000 in grants done, and I've saved the tribe about $5,000 because they're having an internal person do the archaeology. And those are very conservative numbers, considering that tribal archaeologists don't make as much as contractors or universities. And okay, forthcoming stuff. November newsletter article. I'm going to sign up the Wanapum as well as the Yakima Nation Cultural Resources Program to start getting our newsletter. So you can expect that. So you'll see that picture of Annette and I again. The Port Townsend Redskins. There is a football team, or their mascots, the Redskins, and I'm sitting on the panel of that. Obviously, my thought is bias on that. But my big concern right off the bat is going to be whether they have a good process in place when they go to the school board in order to determine whether or not that should remain the name of their mascot. Like I mentioned before, collection management, Discovery Bay. There's another cemetery out there, and they want myself to go out and GPS that cemetery as well. Clown County PUD. Unlike Grant County, I never hear from them, ever, and I end up hearing from the archaeologist they hire out, who does great work, but once again, it's not the government, it's government to contract with the government. That's one of the greatest. Once again, City of Sequin, I just never get a response from them, so kind of knocking on their door, maybe presenting to them, and trying to get them up to speed with cultural resources. Thank you. All right, so I don't want to be a spoiler alert, but for the next tribal calendar, they're going to have parents and also parents who have worked for the tribe and then their kids who are currently working with the tribe. So here's a photograph of my mom. My mom's actually here today. So she worked in natural resources and also did ICW before changing positions. So that's it. It says it there. Feel free to PDF me if you want a copy. Thank you.